Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tropica Trade Group, and this is your end of day as well as end of week recap for Friday, May 3rd, first week of May in the books, and coming to you from downtown Manhattan. Beautiful day again for second day in a row. Beautiful night in New York City, along with the Knicks winning and advancing to the next round. So. I'll get away from sports because I could talk about that for a while with the Rangers playing on Sunday too. But risk disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes. So what I usually do on these Friday videos is I will go through today's performance, talk a little bit about what happened today. And, that's the performance in front of you that is sorted by the biggest percentage from the open. Notice that the other column is, the overall performance for the day. So, some really nice movers, overall. And of course, we get a gap up today, which makes things a bit more complicated to trade. But, things kind of settled in. Really as I went over in yesterday's video, very high tick on the tick index this morning, just indicating just an exuberant amount on the open, and then kind of a cool off again. And overall, very impressive performance for the day. And the Qs actually did outperform from the open, just 20 basis points from the open, but for the day up 2%. And again, when you look at the roller coaster after the open, it's pretty impressive to see that the market actually ended up gaining from the open. So I'll talk a little bit more about today's performance, and then we'll review the week, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I thought were some standout areas for the week and some relative strength. What was particularly interesting, and I'll kind of start with the boring stuff, bonds and the dollar. So I'll go through those charts in just a second, but I mean, I think that's really, besides this was such a busy week in terms of economics and all the earnings reports too. I mean, really a jam-packed week in terms of events. Forget, because every day seemed like it was a week in itself in terms of what we had in terms of earnings, and you forget that a couple of days ago was the Fed meeting too. So a lot of data today as well. I thought so the jobs data came in kind of like thread the needle in terms of what the market was looking for. Wage increases ticked down a little bit, right? And that really helps things out, and the dollar dove, and so did rates on that initial number. And then of course we had the ISM services, which I mentioned this morning. I'm like, I wouldn't discount that ISM services number, because that could really move the market around. And it did. At 10 o'clock, that number came out, and prices paid was higher, and the market didn't like that, and had an initial move down. But breadth stayed positive for the day, and kind of carried through. So let me go through a couple charts. I have up in the background here the XBI chart, because XBI biotech was actually your best performing U.S. group today. It's not a sector. I think biotech is more known as a group. The sector that it belongs to is healthcare. But interesting, retaking this, it'd be nice if this is the beginning of the move in biotech, because it really has been a dud since, for the last couple months. Had this nice breakout, and then breakout really fell apart and trickled back into the value area. But let's see. It wasn't one of the best performing groups today, but the week performance was impressive, and the level to watch there is 88.94 in the equally weighted biotech ETF. So let's talk about. I mentioned we'll go through a couple of the boring things. So my view on bonds, which I don't review bonds every day because it's tough to put together end of day videos and to talk about bonds, which are not all that exciting, of course. But my view on bonds is that so this is nice to see this consolidation. This was the Virgin point of control that was taken out. We kind of meandered around here a little bit. And nice to see this get back above the 20-day moving average, right? So it kind of just takes the pressure off of the market when you keep seeing yields go higher. It is a headwind for a lot of areas of equities. Maybe not all equities, you could argue. Apple for one, right? They don't have to worry about interest rates going higher. They've got a boatload of cash. but you know, your small cap groups and you know, some of the other areas that companies that have pretty decent debt kind of just alleviates the pressure a little bit. So this is number one. I thought was an interesting development for the week, right? And then also the dollar. Let me go to currencies here. Or I can actually just do, yeah, I'll do this in Thinkorswim. I'm used to bringing up the chart there and Thinkorswim. So here's the dollar, and you know, it was interesting. This was on I believe this was on the Fed day where this tried to go higher and failed. Right, got back to the highs from April. This was April 16th. And made that attempt and failed. So you know, again, it didn't close on the lows of the day, but it's nice to see this drop below the 20-day moving average. Remember, bonds moved back above their 20-day moving average, and the dollar moved back above the 20-day moving average. So like in terms of like macro analysis or market structure, both of these things kind of going in the way, going the right way for equity bulls, right? It kind of takes the pressure off, a little bit more risk on when you see these things take shape like that. So that's number one. Just to kind of review the indices, because I've been doing this very all week long in terms of, you know, essentially just giving you like a snapshot of where there's support, resistance, and I find when we're kind of like in between and looking for direction in the indices, watching some of these levels becomes really important, right? You won't find me go over these levels when we're doing something like this, right? When we're trending above the value area for the month, right? All I'm basically going to say is that we're trending, right? And, you know, in this case, we were in this upward channel, but there's really not that much analysis I could provide. Here, it becomes more important because we're kind of, you know, we're figuring out, you know, which way we're going to go. And before I go to that 1 hour chart, which has been giving us some really great signals for the last couple weeks, the major development there is a nice move back inside or actually not back, but first move inside the value area for the month. Notice this little rule up here. It says bullish 80% rule, and if you can't read that, I'm reading it for you. I know that the print is very small here, but it says bullish 80% rule. If you're not familiar with the 80% rule using value area studies, which are based on volume at price, you can, number one, Google that to see that I'm not making up that rule, but it means that once price establishes itself inside the value area, there's an 80% chance that it goes through to the other side by the end of the period. So it's not a 100% rule; it's an 80% rule that played out once we broke into and it works in both directions. This is bullish when we broke inside the value area for the month of April. That was also fulfilled, right? And we actually didn't stop there; we kept going. But that was the bearish 80% rule, as I highlighted during that time frame. But still have to get above the 50-day moving average. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and above the 5 and the 20-day moving average. So that's pretty good progress. You know, we could do a number of things from here. You can make up your own scenario, whichever people love to do that and say, oh, this could happen and that could happen. We could have an inside day on Monday. We could come back and back check that bottom of value, you know, or we could keep going. So those are a couple things, and I joke, but it is important to kind of go through a scenario analysis so that, to make sure that you're kind of planned, or you're thinking about possible outcomes and about your risk and about strategy and so on and so forth. This was, you know, one of the things that we kind of started to say as the week wore on. You know, besides this, you know, funky move that happened on Fed Day, which sometimes does happen, is that we did put in what's known as a higher low, which is constructive, right? Here was the low from last week, right? We bounced on that. You know, of course, we came back and kind of tested. We didn't go back there and revisit that. We kind of hung around this bottom of value area and then really kind of picked a direction and went with it. And we closed at the week highs. So, you know, this is for for folks that like to do a lot of scalping too. There's been a lot of opportunities to take advantage of you know, playing both sides of the market and just knowing where the risk to reward sets up as we started to kind of make some progress. And even this move, back testing this. Notice this candle did not close outside of the value area, closed inside the value area, and a pretty nice move from there. Just to kind of go through the rest of these, we'll do the Qs here as well. Just bring this up here. Here's the Qs, right into that 200, not 200, right into the 50-day moving average, right? So very impressive to see where we were yesterday, and a 2% move, also triggering the bullish 80% rule and checking right into that 50-day moving average. Some people, we had a conversation. We have Q&A for members every 1 o'clock on Friday, and there was a great question about, like, hey, do you believe in paying attention to the 50-day and the 200-day moving average? Yes, I do, because every institutional trader has those, and some of them, some institutional investors, traders, who are not, who don't rely on the technicals, they still will know enough, and on every Bloomberg terminal, right? Bloomberg is used by most institutional traders. You can, the 3 default moving averages that are listed there are the 200-day moving average, the 100-day moving average, and the 50-day moving average. So even if, investors are not, institutional or big institutions are not technically savvy, they still know what the 50-day, they still know enough to get by, and knowing that above the 50-day moving average is really where your uptrend, your stronger uptrend, needs to get back above. So I think more to come, more to follow in terms of next week. Just to go through IWM, just because I like to kind of close the loop here. But this actually was very different than how the S&P and the Qs looked. No surprise, because IWM has been doing that for a while, just looking different than the other indices. But notice, like, this got back above the value area right in the beginning of the week, and was actually the first one to kind of retake it. So again, just kind of interesting how that worked out. Ran right into this virgin point of control. So again, these virgin point of controls, when they're above the price action, represents overhead supply. When they're below, they can be demand areas, right, where buyers basically live. All right. So notice what this did, right? It slammed right into that virgin point of control, and that was the high for the day, essentially, for IWM. All right, so I talked about biotech. I'm going to talk about a couple other sectors. Let's bring up the week's performance so that you can kind of see what transpired this week. SPY was essentially like a little better than flat for the week, just because of, where we started the week. We sold off, we came back as illustrated on that 1-hour chart. Diamonds were up 1.2%. Nice performance today, of course, from Apple. Also, Amgen is also in the Dow, only 30 names in there. The Qs ended up, I guess that's right, only up 1%. Really nice performance, of course, from those emerging markets, which got a lot of attention. The Chinese Internet ETF was not the best performing group, but obviously had a huge day yesterday. Was up 6.5% for the week. Whenever you see solar and clean energy up there on the top of the leaderboard, it's more of a risk on week. Those did quite well. Amazing what's going on with the utilities, up 3.3% for the week. Really impressive. I know there's a lot of theories about that, about power generation and that kind of thing, AI soaking up a lot of power, and utilities in a good spot for that for that situation. The banks also did well this week. Aerospace and defense, I spent some time going through, and because we just don't have a lot of groups that are at 52-week highs, and you take a look at this ITA ETF, it's a market cap weighted ETF, so the bigger names are a good portion, make up more of the weights of the ETF, and this made it out to 52-week highs, and I think that's actually an all-time high in the defense names. But Boeing is 14% of this ETF, and I personally want no part of Boeing, because you've got event risk, you got headline risk with that company, and that's not something that I care for. And especially when you start to look at some of the other names that are doing the heavy lifting. I think this is one of them, even though I haven't traded this one. Let's get out of the futures. Look at this. This is Heiko Corporation. these trends will, if you haven't been paying attention to this group, these are just beautiful charts that have been just breaking higher like this. FTAI, which is a name that I traded about a month ago, and I kind of backed off from it, or, around earnings, and it kind of went sideways. But I like this company, and out to new highs. This is FTAI aviation. TDG, sorry, for whatever reason, I have a hard time with that symbol. But that is also, very nice breakout to new highs. So again, this is called relative strength when you see this, right? So, and again, overcoming that weakness in Boeing. And by the way, if you want to see what Boeing looks like, someone just told me about this feature in TradingView. I really like this, but you could look at the company versus its sector, right? And notice what this is, I mean, what a drag this thing has been on the group, and it just shows you how strong. So you could do it this way too, if it helps your brain to get around this. But look at the so if you went long ITA and if you went long the ETF in short Boeing, I mean, you've really had some nice gains over the last few months. All right, and then of course, I'm still getting this confused the way that GE did this, but this is another one. I'm long GE. I got long GE on this little day in here, and I'm still holding a position. But then the other one, which is GEV, GE for Verona, which I thought that was the aerospace name. Again, I'm still trying to figure that out, how GE when their spinoffs are doing. But this is GEV. Had a huge day today. This speaking of electrical power and that type of a thing. And I guess they don't call it a utility. They call it electrical power equipment. Designs, manufactures, and delivers electrical power systems and service that generate, transfer, orchestrate, convert, and store electricity. What a hot sector right now, or group this is. But complete, and it's funny because it's not an IPO, it's a spinoff, and really impressive. And I was highlighting this a couple days this week. I remember seeing this break to highs back on Monday, and it kind of filled in nicely. And we put this name on our watch list, and had a really strong group. And then of course there's CEG, which reports earnings next week. Very, very strong. VST, another one that's breaking to the highs. So meanwhile, while the sectors are still kind of trying to straighten themselves out, this is where you've got some really good strength. So I'm interested in what happens with biotech too. The home builders really liked the move in rates today, but they did not close on their highs. It's tough because this morning they all opened up. Like there were some of these home builders that were up 4, 5, 6% today, and I looked at them and I'm like, whoa, this looks really interesting, but I'm not going to chase any of this. And I think that was the right move, because look at what this did today. And it got rejected at the top of that. Speaking of overhead supply, look at this virgin point of control lining up perfectly with the top of value. And unfortunately, that's what happened to the home builders. Still, again, if you were long from yesterday, into this group, really nice. And I did stick Pulte yesterday did a rebalance in the TTG trend portfolio, which is basically like an ETF, except it doesn't trade on an exchange. So even though it didn't close on the highs like this and kind of got rejected at the previous highs, still a really nice move. And let's see if it will settle in here and back and fill a little bit. I'm going to show you. So let me finish the performance, and then I'll show you like how our watch list did for the week. But biotech, we talked about utilities. Talked about most of these groups. To the downside, kind of interesting the way that this, even with the nice way that the week ended, value was down for the week, just slightly in the red, and growth was up 1.1%. We talked about TLT. We talked about some emerging markets. Very interesting to see how that played out. My position that I've been long is PDD. Had another good nice follow through day today. I talked about in yesterday's video how I like sticking with the leaders. So you could go through yesterday's video if you want to hear that market commentary. Oil services were down 3.5. Really like an amazing flip around in terms of that relative strength that was in energy and in some of the metals names. names. Look at the gold miners down 3.3%, and XME was flat for the week. That ETF has some steel and has some mining in it. And materials were also flat. The transports, finally, a couple of names did better in the transports. Uh, that group was being hit hard. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead because my eyes are looking at the semis, which were essentially flat for the week, right? Overall, interesting, right? And we'll bring up the big guy. Nvidia gets back above its 50-day moving average. Not, pretty good shape, I think, right now, right? Nice to see it get back above its 50, and also get back above this group. Here's what SMH, I know because it's such a widely looked at, widely watched group. Flat for the week, and watch that 50-day moving average, right? Which is right in here. All right, so next I mentioned that I would give you how our watch list did for the week. And also, here's the sector snapshot. This is something new that I've created, just something that shows strength and weakness. There was, a couple days ago, there was a ton of groups that were showing weakness, all, below. How I define that just is very simple, is below the 5, the 20, and the 50-day moving average, such as the oil and XOP. So again, went from like first to last very, very quickly. And now you've got 5 different groups. 5 groups. Consumer staples, which have been up there, industrials. We could look at that chart too. I don't think it's really that revealing yet, but clearly there is some strength in depending on what groups in the industrials. But back above the 50-day moving average, I think it still needs to kind of prove itself here a little bit further. Nice bounce on the bottom of value yesterday, and we'll see how that shapes up. And utilities, which we've already talked about, home builders, which we've already talked about too, and then the banks, which again, that was the group that started to show some strength a couple of weeks ago. And here's what the banks look like. Again, not the like easiest chart to analyze or look at. It's basically to the top of the range, but decent, all above all these short-term moving averages. All right, and then our watch list for the week. Right, I mentioned that I added GEV to the watch list. That was actually the best performer for this list. I don't include names I don't include names that I'm already long on the watch list. And I'll show you that group in just a second. But Abercrombie and Fitch, that was a name that we covered earlier in the week, obviously set up. Kava, which I did put Kava on and took some profits in that name today. That was a real nice technical setup, in my opinion. I also did get long a little bit of Celsius this morning too. Thought it might move a little bit more on the Monster beverage results, but Monster actually was a little bit weak right around the open too. So there's our changes for the week. Yeah, here's my swing trades. I mean, I'm probably jinxing something, but did pretty well with going after the names that I wanted to. Google is kind of like is for me like a must-watch name because it had such good earnings. It hasn't really done much yet, but that's okay. As long as it's still kind of holding the trend. So I'll just go over a couple of these positions. And you see, if you're a member of Tribeca Trade Group, you will get this file in the middle of the day. You'll also get the file at the end of the day. And what I also do is any new positions that I get into, right, you're going to see that not only do I put that in the trading room, but you'll see it in Substack. I'll go over the chart. I'll talk about, hey, this is a new position. You'll see my entry price, and I'll give you the reasoning behind it. But yeah, and I actually took a profit target in the beginning of the day with this, and sure enough, it sold off, and I put the target back on. But as long as it stays above the short-term moving average, I think that the dips will get bought. Even if it comes back in and eventually checks back to the top of the value area, I think that will be a place to kind of put on a larger trade, maybe a better setup if that happens. A couple I already went over PDD, of course, which has been I'm now up over 20% in that name. TMDX, which was basically just a starter position. Sometimes those starter positions work really well, and nice follow through for that one. I mentioned Kava already. Wingstop also was kind of iffy from where I established it. It actually went a little bit lower, but was able to recoup. And I took off App11, which is reports next week. ZS kind of interesting. I was dogged. Sometimes this is what happens. I was really kind of mentioning how bad the cyber names have been, the relative weakness in that group. And of course, we saw more names report this week, like FTNT and cyber, which just they didn't even after relative weakness, they're still not showing any strength. There's interesting, a lot of calls being bought for next week, as well as the May calls in for Zscaler. So I took a flyer on this position today. I did take a quick target because, especially in a name that I'm just getting involved in, because there was interesting option flow. I'll always size the position a little bit smaller because option flow is just speculative, maybe mostly, but we'll see. Maybe it can stay above this 20-day moving average and rally up to the top of value, which is about another 3.3% ahead. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining me for the Q&A, not Q&A, that was earlier today, for the end of week recap. You could go to tribecatradegroup.com to be involved, and you can actually sign up for free for a few days so that you can just basically get our recap email, which is the same as the Substack, so you could see what it's like to be just to get the recaps and the positions. But you can go to services and products to sign up to be in our trading room and a part of our trading community. All right, guys, have a great weekend, and thanks for joining me. Hope you had a great week.